World War III, the very phrase sends shivers down our spines. It represents the ultimate failure of diplomacy, the catastrophic collapse of peace. The consequences of such a conflict are almost too terrible to contemplate, yet contemplate them we must. Imagining the aftermath of a global conflict isn't about reveling in destruction, it's about understanding the fragility of our existence. It's about recognizing the stakes and striving to prevent such a catastrophe, because once the missiles fly, there's no turning back. The world would be forever changed. Cities would be reduced to rubble. Millions, perhaps billions, would perish. The very fabric of civilization would be torn apart. But even in the darkest of times, hope has a way of flickering through. Humanity's resilience, our ability to adapt and rebuild, should never be underestimated. The question is, what kind of world would we build from the ash? The immediate aftermath of World War III would be a scene of unimaginable devastation. Nuclear firestorms would leave entire cities in ruins, glowing embers beneath a sky choked with ash. Radiation sickness would spread like a silent epidemic. Survivors would emerge from shelters into a world they no longer recognize, a world of silence and shadows. The lucky ones would have escaped the initial blasts, but survival would be a daily struggle. Food and water would be scarce, medical supplies non-existent. The rule of law would have crumbled, replaced by desperation and fear. In the face of such overwhelming loss, the human spirit would be put to the ultimate test. The will to live, to rebuild, would be all that stands between us and extinction. Amidst the ruins, the survivors of World War III would face the daunting task of rebuilding. The initial priority would be simple survival. Finding food, water and shelter would consume every waking moment. Humanitarian aid, if it came at all, would be slow and inadequate. The scale of the disaster would overwhelm even the most well-intentioned efforts. Communities would have to rely on themselves, pooling their meager resources and helping their neighbors. The lines between friend and foe might blur in the face of shared hardship. Former enemies might find themselves working together, bound by the common goal of survival. This spirit of cooperation, forged in the crucible of war, could be the key to rebuilding a shattered world. The geopolitical landscape would be redrawn in the aftermath of World War III. Old alliances would crumble, and new power dynamics would emerge. The very concept of nation-states might be called into question. Nations that avoided the worst of the destruction could find themselves thrust onto the world stage. Their resources and ideologies would shape the new world order. Regional powers could rise to fill the void left by fallen giants. But with power comes responsibility. The choices made by these new leaders would determine the fate of humanity. Would they repeat the mistakes of the past or forge a new path based on cooperation and mutual respect? The future, uncertain as it may be, would rest in their hands. Let us hope they choose wisely. Section 5. The Scars of War, Environmental and Technological Fallout. World War III wouldn't just leave scars on the planet, it would leave wounds that could take centuries to heal. Nuclear fallout would render vast areas uninhabitable, poisoning the soil and water. Climate change, already a pressing concern, could be accelerated by the release of greenhouse gases from burning cities and industrial centers. The delicate balance of nature would be thrown into disarray. Technology, once a symbol of progress, could become a double-edged sword. The remnants of advanced weaponry could pose a continuing threat, while the loss of infrastructure could plunge us into a new dark age. Yet, even in this technological wasteland, there would be glimmers of hope. Simple technologies, forgotten in the rush for progress, could prove vital for survival. The ability to grow food, purify water, and generate energy off-grid could become essential skills. Section 6. Rebuilding society from the ashes to hope. Rebuilding society after World War III wouldn't be just about bricks and mortar, it would be about rebuilding trust, community, and shared values. The trauma of war would leave deep psychological scars, shaping the worldviews of generations to come. The institutions that once held society together, governments, economies, even families, would need to be reimagined. New forms of governance, based on consensus and cooperation, might emerge. Local communities, rather than nation-states, could become the primary unit of social organization. The values we choose to prioritize in this new world will be critical. Will we cling to the old ways of competition and conflict, or embrace a future based on empathy, compassion, and shared responsibility for our planet? The answers to these questions will determine the fate of humanity. The world after World War III could be a very different place, but whether it's a better one is up to us. Section 7, the human spirit endures, adapting to a changed world. Despite the unimaginable hardships, it's important to remember that humans are remarkably resilient creatures. Throughout history, we've faced countless challenges, natural disasters, plagues, wars, and emerged from each, forever changed, but unbroken. The world after World War III would test our limits, but it wouldn't break us. We would adapt, as we always have. We would find new ways to survive, to connect with each other, to find meaning in a changed world. Perhaps the trauma of war would force us to confront our shared humanity, to recognize that our differences pale in comparison to the bonds that unite us. Out of the ashes of destruction, a new sense of global citizenship could arise, one based on empathy, understanding, and a shared commitment to peace. Section 8, Lessons from the Brink. The importance of peace and cooperation. The purpose of imagining such a bleak future isn't to wallow in despair, but to learn from the mistakes of the past. World War III, if it ever happens, would be the ultimate failure of human reason and compassion. It would be a stark reminder of the fragility of peace and the importance of diplomacy, dialogue, and understanding. We must remember that peace isn't the absence of conflict, it's the ability to resolve conflict peacefully. It requires empathy, compromise, and a willingness to see the world through the eyes of others. If we can learn these lessons without having to endure the horrors of another world war, then perhaps there's hope for humanity after all. Section 9, a call to action, our shared responsibility. The future isn't something that happens to us, it's something we create. Each of us has a role to play in shaping a more peaceful and just world. We can't afford to be bystanders in the face of injustice, inequality, and the threat of war. We must challenge those who seek to divide us. We must speak out against violence and oppression. We must demand that our leaders prioritize diplomacy and cooperation over aggression and conflict. The world after World War III, if there is one, will be shaped by the choices we make today. Let us choose wisely. Let us choose peace.